A question that I get every once in a while is, Pastor Matt, you know that Lies My Pastor Told Me on again, off again sermon series you have? When did it start, and what was your first one? The answer is it was this text, and it was 2017 in Nebraska, for those of you who are interested. Started a long time ago in a completely different state. And the reason I started with this is because this is this text that has gotten misused for many generations on top of each other. Because too often pastors will get up here and say, I am the good shepherd. You are the dumb sheep. Follow me. Right? Or some derivation thereof. Even though the text itself is really explicit. Jesus says like 5 different ways, I am the good shepherd. As in, Jesus is the good shepherd. It ain't me. Okay? And then I go on to talk about what about the role of this sheepdog. And by the way, sheep aren't actually as stupid as we like to make them out to be, and so on and so forth. But back in 2017, when I first launched it and first went into all those sorts of details, it was all this hypothetical stuff. And I remember folks would push back and say, you know, I like what you had to say. Yeah, it's sort of historically accurate. Yeah, I get the sort of theology behind it. But what does it really mean in 2017? And my answer would be, well, everything comes around and goes around. History loves to repeat itself. Eventually the wolves will come. And then you will learn who everyone is in the story. Then came 2020. 3 years later. And we learned that. In 2020, what we learned is that you basically had 3 choices. Okay? Everyone at first decided, we're all closing down, we'll flatten the curve, and 3 weeks later, once this horrible storm is over, we'll go back to normal. Do you remember that little period of time? Yeah. And then at some point, every church, every community, every organization out there, frankly, every company out there had to face the reality this was not a bad blizzard. That this was going to go on for a long time. In the church, an interesting thing happened. You had a whole bunch of folks who went in, not intending on retiring. So I'm not talking about folks who planned their retirement months in advance, or even folks who retired before COVID hit, okay? Not talking about them. That's just normal, everyday stuff. But we had a whole chunk of folks who, for all their communities knew, were going to stay on through what COVID became, that were like, you know, I'm out of here. Whole slew of retirements occur about 3 months into COVID. Again, some retirements are normal, some retirements are pre-planned. I'm not talking about those folks. I'm talking about the folks who were going to be there, but they just left. These folks, by the way, had a whole similarity to them. They were the pastors who would say, yeah, I'm really special, I'm a shiny penny, and I'm not going to learn technology because I'm too old. Right? They were that way going into COVID, and then COVID basically said, all right, if we're going to have church, we're going to have to go online. And if we're going to go online, you got to learn a whole slew of new skills. Right? You had to learn that as congregants, you had to learn that in your own businesses, you had to learn that in your schools. You had to learn a whole set of new skills. We had a whole slew of pastors who were like, yeah, you know what I said? Not going to learn that technology. Wolves are here. I'm definitely not learning it to fight back. And I'm gone. Those folks, my friends, were the hired hands. That's who Jesus is talking about. Now, that isn't just pastors. I like to pick on pastors because I am one. And if I'm going to pick on communities, I pick on my own, right? But there are leaders, there are whole churches that closed down and then never reopened, never went online, never did anything. Most of them aren't here anymore. Because what? The flock scattered. They went to other churches, they went home and never came back. Who knows? See, this is a great example of something that in 2017 felt not real, felt theoretical, and yet 3 years later, oh man, is it real. Now, if you had started earlier, I decided not to give you a really long one because I did that to you throughout all Holy Week, and if you're all recovering from very long scripture reading still. So if you had gone further back, it would have started off with a discussion over not just wolves, but thieves and robbers that go after it. Now, I would argue you have that in the church too. Because, again, I like to pick on pastors because I am one. You had a whole bunch of churches that had another route that they went. They closed down like everyone for those first 3 weeks. And then they went, well, I don't want to learn new skills, just like the pastors who vanished. They had a different answer. They said, we're just going to open right back on up, aren't we? Not only are we just going to open right back on up, we're going to defy the government, we're going to do all this, we are going to put our people at risk. And some of them did it for philosophical or political reasons, that's fine enough. What I'm not talking about them, what I am talking about are those that did it when it was against their denomination, so it ain't their theology. Those that did it where maybe they made a political argument, but if you really looked at their history, that wouldn't make much sense given who they were. And then they spread horrible theology. A theology that I think we can all laugh at, which is to say, well, if you have faith, you will not die. That's horrible theology. That is ridiculous theology. Now, granted, there are denominations where that is part of their heritage, and I'm not judging them for who they are, but there are a lot of folks who are not in those very limited few, like, Church of Science denominations that would not buy that in any other case. Right? That wasn't part of their theology. That's not part of their tradition. That's not part of their heritage. That was just an excuse to get back open because they did not want to have to learn a new skill. They did not want to have to try hard. They did not want to actually protect their sheep from the wolves. They said, let's just walk towards them. And because of that, people died. Their own sheep died. Their own community died. Those aren't hired hands. Those are the thieves and bandits that wanted to make sure the coffers stayed full, the churches stayed open, because they couldn't find another way. But granted, further you get in there, harder it gets to know when do you reopen, right? I don't know what was harder, closing or reopening. Honestly, on me, it was reopening, because you never quite knew what to do. Any of you who are here at Nativity knows that was gut-wrenching conversations, not because people are fighting, but because you're just like, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I got to make a decision today about next month. Right? These were hard conversations. And if you had thieves and bandits in charge, you were in trouble. The churches that are alive today, the churches that are doing okay today, as we look back and say, what happened and where are we now? Are the churches where leadership, the pastor, whoever was in charge, whoever had those levers of power in that congregation at that time, stood up and said, it ain't any one of us that's the shepherd. It ain't your council president, it ain't your pastor, it ain't whatever. We all got to come together as one community and try to make hard decisions in a hard time. And when some of these decisions are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, most of them are going to be simply imperfect. Those are the folks that understand the idea of a good shepherd. Those leaders, those pastors, those bishops, whoever we're talking about. They knew that Christ was their good shepherd. They knew that it was their goal to try to faithfully make the best decision they could with the information they had, and everything else they got to just sort of like let go. And it's those communities that knew their shepherd in those times in which the wolf came that today survive. It is those communities that weren't scattered. It is those communities that continue on. See, a lot of things in the Bible are telling you of times that you may not have yet experienced. But if we don't do the work today, if we don't ask the questions today, it can haunt us tomorrow. See, the thing we've always got to remember is no matter how good or how awesome your pastor is, they are not the good shepherd. It is Jesus. No matter how good or how awesome your leadership is, they are not the good shepherd. They are Jesus. The reality is, probably the worst thing about the way this used to get preached was it convinced us that all of us, myself included, were anything but sheep. We are one flock, one community, with one shepherd. And we're all just doing the best we can. as you go out today, take a few minutes in your prayer life and ask yourself, is my faith in God? Or is my faith in something of humanity? Amen.